Hey, church. I hope you're doing well. Have you ever acted foolishly? Have you ever, been a fool? You acted a fool. You acted in a way that people looked at you and said, "Whew, you must be out of your mind. You have got to be crazy. There's something wrong with you. You're acting weird. What's going on?" Have you been a fool? Now, there's two ways we can look at this. There's two different ways we could go. In one sense, the Bible talks a lot about being foolish in a negative light. If you read through Proverbs, for instance, you see all of these pictures of fools being unwise, foolish with money, foolish with time. A fool says in their heart that there is no God. That's something that we want to avoid, being a fool in that way, which is something that I know I've done and I'm imagining that you have done as well, is something that we want to not be associated with. We don't want to be a fool along those lines. But did you know there's another way to be a fool that's a little more positive? There's a description of a fool or of being outside of yourself or outside of your right mind or out of your mind in a way that it's actually could be construed as good, as something that we should maybe embrace or adopt. If you've watched these videos, there are times, including last week, where I do things that on the surface might seem kind of foolish. Last week I shaved a mustache, and that's just a style choice, but it's foolish because it affected, how Krista views me. The image that she has of me changes. She thinks that I don't look so good with a mustache. And so that's kind of a foolish thing to do, but it was a foolish thing to do with a purpose, right? The mustache was supposed to show that we need to be faithful in the small things. We need to recognize that the little things can have a big impact, and we need to be faithful even in our little day-to-day decisions. Faithful in the small, so that we can be trusted with more. A foolish action, wearing a mustache, hopefully pointing to a greater good, more of a benefit. So this week I thought, how could I continue in that theme? How can I continue to be foolish to point you more to Jesus? And I thought, what hairstyle might I adopt that could maybe express that point? And I could come up with a lot of them that are hard to rock for a while. But then I thought, sort of a standard, middle of the road, could be foolish, could be stylish. It depends on your perspective. Haircut that might hopefully make a point for today is the mullet. You may not be able to see that right now at this point. I've been facing forward most of the time, but I decided, let's go for the mullet. Maybe the mullet can make a point that it's good to be foolish for Christ if it means others will grow closer to Jesus. And so that's what I tried today. Here it is. Party in the back, long and untouched. Business up front. We got the mullet going. But why? Why do these things? Why stand out in the woods and swat flies and get all hot in the summer and all cold in the winter and dance and make a fool of myself on a number of occasions in a number of different ways? Why do that stuff? Don't I have sense? And is it just like, a comedy hour? Or is there something more to it? Is there a point behind it? See, Paul addresses this a little bit when he's writing his letter to the Corinthians, and this is his second letter, and we'll start in chapter 5, and we'll look at verse 13. But if you back up a little bit from verse 13, you can see that Paul is in this conversation with the Corinthians where people have been expressing judgment against Paul, and they've been saying, that guy's nuts. He doesn't have it all together. The stuff that he's doing isn't right. Look at these things. And Paul in verse 12, he says, I'm writing you so that you have an opportunity so that you can answer those who take pride in what is seen rather than what is in the heart. Paul says, I'm writing you here to address the things that are important. It doesn't matter what's on the outside so much, but what matters is what's in the heart. And then in verse 13, he says, if we are out of our mind, it is for the sake of God. If I appear foolish, it's for the sake of God. If I'm actually crazy and out of my mind, if I am a fool, it is for God's sake. If we are in our right mind, it is for you. But if these things that I do, if the ways that I go about my life, if it's actually in my right mind and there's a reason behind it, it's for your sake, Paul says to the Corinthians. I'm doing this for you. The way I live is for you. The message that I share is for you. The things that I do are for you. And then he gets into the why. For Christ's love compels us, because we are convinced that one died for all, and therefore all died. And he died for all, that those who live should no longer live for themselves, but for him who died for them and was raised again. See, Paul says, I'm doing this. I'm living in this way. All of these things that people are criticizing me about and coming against me about, they're done for a reason, and that's so that you might know that Jesus is the one who died for all. And that those who live should no longer live for themselves, but should live for Christ. That they're not worried about their image or their appearance or the things that go on the outside, but that they're concerned with the heart, and that everything they do would be so that others might come to know Jesus as well. Paul could operate as a fool because his heart was in the right place with Jesus, and he wasn't concerned about all of this or what others might think of him. He was concerned about demonstrating the love of Christ through his life. He was concerning about no longer living for himself, but living for him who died and was raised again. Whenever I was in college, I went to Grove City, and they have this thing where they have mandatory chapels. It's like enforced church, or at least they did when I was there. And some of it was okay. Some of it was less than okay, at least in the opinion of, a college-age kid at that time. But I remember this one guest speaker coming in, and I'm pretty sure it was for one of these chapel requirements. But he came in and he gave a lecture, a speech, a sermon, and he was a well-dressed 60-something-year-old guy. The works. Nice suit, nice tie, nice shirt. He didn't have the flies buzzing around his face, but he was put together. And he was passionate about Jesus, and he was up there sharing about the Lord, and he was raising his arms and raising his voice, and he was giving everything he had to try to convince these college kids who were forced to sit in a chapel lesson that Jesus was worth living their life for. That it was worth putting your life in the arms of the Savior who had died for you. And then he did something that just stuck in my head. This guy in this suit, in this tie, in this well put together outfit, got down on the floor of the stage and just laid there prostrate before the Lord. And he said, I'm willing to do whatever I can, whatever it takes, that people might know your love, Jesus. That people in this place would be willing to do the same. I'm willing to be a fool for you, Christ, that others might know that you died for them, that you live for them, that life is offered to them. I no longer live for myself. I live for you, Jesus, and it doesn't matter what these folks think about me. It only matters what they think about you. I saw that man do that, and I thought at that time, there is no way. I will never get down on my face in a suit and tie and do those things. How can he look that silly in front of all these people? What on earth is he doing? Doesn't he know that dry cleaning's expensive? I got one suit jacket. I'm not laying that thing down on the ground. There's no way. You see, I hadn't come yet to the point where I was living for the Lord. Not completely. I mean, I knew about Jesus. I had belief in God, at least on some level, but I wasn't willing to act a fool for Christ. I wasn't willing to live my life for Jesus instead of just myself. I wanted to look good, to be good, to do good, so that others, when they would talk about me, would say, there goes somebody. He's got it together. There goes somebody who we respect. I didn't want people to look at me and say, that dude is beside himself. He's out of his mind. There goes a fool. No, I was concerned about my image, my reputation, what people might think. The guy on the stage, at least in that moment, was living a different way. And his example stuck for a while. I don't remember most of the chapels I went to. I don't even remember the guy's whole message, but I can still picture him being there on the floor, prostrate before the Lord, begging that others might come to know Christ as he has come to know Jesus. So I ask you, friend, are you willing to be a fool? Are you willing for others to think that you're foolish? That you've been foolish with your time because you spend so much of it in the Word and praying and investing in the lives of others? Are you willing to be foolish with your money because you don't worry about the stock market as much as you worry about how you might contribute to the needs of others and the poor and how you might give back to Jesus? Are you willing to be a fool in terms of your appearance because you're willing to do silly things like a mustache and a mullet just so you might make a point, just so that people might think a little bit? You know, the outward appearance, it really isn't that important. It really isn't. It's external. What God looks at is the heart. Friend, are you willing to be foolish in the eyes of this world, that you might be considered wise in the eyes of Christ? Are you willing to live your lives for somebody other than yourself? Are you willing to live them for Jesus and not worry what anybody else might think? Paul said that Christ's love compels him because he's convinced that one died for all, that Jesus died for all and therefore all died. And he died for all, that those who live should no longer live for themselves, but for him who died for them and was raised again. Friend, how about you? Are you willing to live for the Lord? Are you willing to be foolish in the eyes of this world? And maybe even in the eyes of other believers? That you've given your life to an all-in, fully commitment, do whatever it takes so that some might know the love of Jesus kind of life. Are you willing to be foolish, to be outside of your mind, to be considered in that way, so that people might know Jesus through your life, through your example, through your love? I hope that you are. I pray that you are. I plead that you are. And I hope that as you go about your week this week, if you see somebody with a mustache that you remember, little decisions, big impact. And if you see a mullet or something even crazier than that, you think, I'll be foolish for you, Jesus. I live my life for you, for no other. For God's sake and glory. Amen.